When you think of Resident Evil, fan favorites like Chris and Leon may come to mind, but Jill Valentine stands among them as a pillar that helped lay the foundation for the franchise, and becoming one of the most iconic characters in gaming history. From creating the BSAA to helping take down Albert Wesker, Jill's life's journey is filled with pain and perseverance in order to protect those who are precious to her. So grab a snack, kick back and relax as we take a deep dive into why Jill Valentine is Resident Evil's most important protagonist. During the time when women in video games were no longer relegated to damsels in distress, Jill stood tall with other classic characters like Lara Croft, Samus Aran, and Chun-Li. As the only woman on her team in a male-dominated field, along with her military background, it was clear that she was just as capable and dangerous as her colleagues, but with a delicacy that others just didn't have. And that's not to take away from the other STARS members, but having Jill with them in the heart of all that horror brought them a good balance for their team. Where Chris and Barry would kick the door down with guns drawn, Jill would quietly lockpick it, giving her the chance to assess the area. And that makes a lot of sense given her past role in the US Army as a bomb technician, a job that requires delicate dexterity and a calm mind when disposing bombs. Constantly having to concentrate under crushing pressure amidst a ticking clock that determined whether or not you get to go home after work, forced her to face danger with an analytical approach. Those skills made her a valuable asset that kept the team together as she provided the support needed that balanced out Chris's determination and Barry's overprotectiveness, along with Wesker's cold and calculated mindset. This made them the perfect team of elites as they carried out their missions with efficiency. So when Alpha Team was sent to the Archelane Mountains to investigate the disappearance of Bravo Team, their mission should have been a regular Tuesday for them, clock in at 9 and be out by 5. But nothing could have prepared them for the long night of agony and atrocities that awaited for their arrival. And you can see that on Jill's face the moment they're attacked by Hellhound zombie dogs. Jill Valentine, a natural-born soldier who spent half her life on the battlefield where people die every day, was frozen in fear as her squadmate was shredded to pieces within mere seconds. That brief moment tells us that she's way out of her element here. Luckily, Chris and Wesker bring Jill back to reality, reminding her that she needs to lock in if she wants to live. But even after finding shelter, they don't have much time to breathe before getting attacked by another mysterious monstrosity, and the team getting separated amidst the chaos. Given her skill set and supportive role, she works best with the team, but with that no longer an option, she's forced to dive deeper into the abyss, alone, to find Bravo Team, along with her own missing squadmates. And though the game doesn't show her dealing with that debilitating sense of dread, it's still a very terrifying task to take on. From dogs and walking corpses to giant sharks and superpowered plants, this would break down even the strongest soldiers, crushing whatever hope they had of making it out alive. Especially when every step they take leads to their squadmates' lifeless bodies, an aching reminder of the agony they suffered long before any hope of rescue crossed their minds, as the last moments of their lives were spent alone and afraid. One can only imagine the heavy guilt Jill felt as she couldn't save her comrades from their untimely demise. Nonetheless, she keeps pushing forward, determined to find any survivors and dig up the secrets of the Spencer Manor. And after digging through that dirt filled with Umbrella's countless victims, she finally learns the truth, but at the cost of her trust in her own team, as Barry leaves her to die when she's attacked by Lisa Trevor, and later finds Chris locked up in a holding cell by Wesker. Determined to save her partner, everything finally comes to light when she finds her cold-hearted captain deep in the mansion's underground lab, surrounded by mutated monsters. She learns that Wesker led Alpha Team to their death, all for the sake of combat data against Umbrella's experiments. All those lives lost for nothing more than data to satisfy the sick egomaniacs behind this in their twisted pursuit of human evolution. In that moment, there's nothing Jill can do but lose faith in who she thought were her friends as Barry's gun presses against her back for simply trusting them with her life. But as she accepts her end at the hands of her comrades, Barry has a change of heart and puts Wesker down, literally helping Jill dodge a bullet. He couldn't bring himself to kill her, even though his wife and daughters were threatened by Umbrella and Wesker to follow their orders. But after all their years of working together and putting their lives on the line for each other, Barry didn't see Jill as just another comrade, but as family, no different than a little sister. And even if it meant saving his family, there's no doubt Barry could look them in the eyes with Jill's blood on his hands. That moment shows us the bond between them, that sense of vulnerability that only Jill could bring to the team. And that's further shown when she risks her life to save Chris, even when the mansion is mere minutes from self-destruction. But just like how Barry saved Jill from turning into a Jill sandwich, she saves Chris from becoming a well-done steak. I said she saves Chris from becoming a well-done
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
And even though Chris is the face of Resident Evil, Jill is the sole reason he's able to continue fighting. Otherwise, he'd be nothing more than a distant memory of Umbrella's cruelty. Of course, it doesn't take long for Chris to return the favor, as he helps Jill and Barry fight off the tyrant BOW that's hell-bent on taking them out before the explosion does. Luckily, the STARS members are able to put it down for good with an overpowered rocket to the face. And though they left everything behind like a bad dream, they knew it was only the beginning of a lifelong nightmare that will follow them back to Raccoon City. If you're enjoying the video so far, please feel free to like, subscribe, and join the conversation to support the channel. It really does mean a lot to me and gives me the motivation to keep pushing these videos out for you guys. But without further ado, let's continue. And when they made it back to Raccoon City, it was worse than they could have imagined when they reported everything to their boss, Chief Irons. All those heinous experiments, all those tortured victims, the STARS members who were sacrificed just to uncover the truth, all of it fell on deaf ears from the lack of evidence because of the explosion. What's even worse, Irons wasn't interested with investigating this any further, closing the case completely. And like their former captain, the group suspected the chief to be just as corrupted, working for the Umbrella Corporation. Even so, there is no amount of details you can hide from a group of detectives, as they read in between the lines when dealing with Chief Irons and any other possible spies. So while Barry was in Canada sending his family into hiding to protect them from Umbrella, Chris traveled to Europe to look into his headquarters and search for that elusive evidence. Jill, on the other hand, stayed in Raccoon City to trace Umbrella's activity back to the Spencer Manor, which led to suspension from the RPD and 24-hour surveillance from the corrupted corporation. This soul-crushing situation led her to one dead end after another, with no end in sight. Between her traumatic nightmares from the Manor incident, and constantly looking over her shoulder from those who want to take her out, Resident Evil 3 shows us the mental toll it's having on her, to the point that she can't tell if she's asleep or awake. We don't see that level of psychological trauma from Chris until RE6, when he suffers from amnesia and alcoholism due to all his PTSD throughout the years. But as someone who never had trouble speaking her mind with her heart on her sleeve, it makes sense that it will affect her the most. By this point, the STARS team has been disbanded. Chris is in Europe, Barry is in Canada protecting his family, and Chief Irons is living comfortably in the pockets of Umbrella. She's scared and alone with anxiety and paranoia creeping around every corner. And just like any normal person, she decides that the cheap rent wasn't worth the non-stop stalking. So she decides to leave Raccoon City and help with Chris's investigation in Europe. But the pharmaceutical company had other plans when they sent Nemesis to her doorstep, a bioweapon with no remorse, no mercy, whose mission was to take out the remaining STARS and bury them along with all of Umbrella's secrets. It's often frowned upon to take advantage of a woman when she's in a vulnerable state, but Nemesis was never one to care as he pursues Jill throughout the city in the hopes of putting her down. But despite her fragile state of mind, she's far from breaking down, showing us her mental and physical fortitude in the face of danger that's guaranteed the deaths of those around her. And what makes matters worse, one of Umbrella's underground research facilities caused a viral outbreak, turning the citizens into zombies, no different than at the Spencer Manor, but on a much grander scale. As if she didn't have enough reason to leave, the government decided to nuke the city because they feel it's a lost cause. Perhaps it was good for Jill to have gone through that horrific time in the Archelate Mountains. Despite the trauma she endured, it was a training she needed for the many battles to come. And who knows, without that experience, she probably would have died 5 minutes into the outbreak. But with help from Carlos Oliveira, an Umbrella operative, she's able to put down the bloodthirsty bioweapon for good. You could argue that this is the second time Jill saved Chris's life, because if she failed to kill Nemesis, that bombastic behemoth would have tracked him down to the ends of the earth, and probably would have killed him considering Chris was on his own while in Europe. But she doesn't have time to celebrate, as she and Carlos still have to escape the city minutes before it's taken off the map. And as they both make it out by helicopter, Jill watches as her home, her childhood, everything she's known, is bombarded with missile strikes, nothing left but run-down ruins, a reminder of one of humanity's worst tragedies in history. By this point, Jill has survived 2 viral outbreaks, a bioweapon attack, and a nuke explosion, all while dealing with her severe mental scarring from all this chaos. But instead of laying low and trying to keep as much distance from Umbrella as possible for a much more peaceful life, this motivates her even more to continue her mission of taking down the corrupted corporation.
Get off me! No! Get off! Oh my gosh, get off me, please!
But to everyone's utter shock, Umbrella isn't taken out by the STARS members, nor the FBI or the CIA. Instead, the conglomerate, with all the money, power, and resources to do whatever it wanted, was taken out by its own shareholders, putting the company in debt. When the public learns that Umbrella was behind the Raccoon City outbreak, its investors pulled out, not wanting to be tied to any form of terrorism, at least not publicly. But even so, Jill knew all too well that this wasn't the end of it. Where the pharmaceutical powerhouse was swallowed up by the flames of their own ambition, many other organizations rose from the ashes to take its place, and getting their hands on Umbrella's many blueprints on bioweapons helped them rise above the rest in a world where nations are always at war with each other, making limitless profit for those who thrive in the center of chaos and conflict. And as someone who knows all the pain, the trauma, and the lifelong scars from merely being a bystander during their pursuit for power, Jill wouldn't want anyone else to suffer at the hands of such hubris. So along with Chris, who also had his own troubles with bioterrorism and Code Veronica, decided to create the BSAA, a paramilitary organization that combats bioterrorists and BOWs that are sold on the black market. What started off as a private military group eventually grew into a global task force, supported by the United Nations, with thousands of soldiers willing to lay down their lives for those who can't protect themselves. By this point, Jill has made it pretty far in life, and thanks to her efforts, countless people are able to live out their own lives in relative peace. So if she decided to retire and live the rest of her days far away from the brutal world of bioterrorism, we would fully understand and be happy for her. And I'm sure it's crossed her mind a few times during her missions, telling herself this is the last one. Kinda like when we swear we're going to quit our day job after a terrible shift, but we find ourselves back at it again. So when she learned that Wesker was still alive out there, she and Chris went to tracking him down as if his very existence could undo all of their hard work and the countless sacrifices of their comrades. And they decided to hammer in that final nail in the coffin, hoping it would finally be the end of Umbrella, the last of his skeletons never again seeing the light of day. To Jill and Chris, this was more than just a mission you get on a regular Tuesday. They want to take out the man who forced them into a life of conflict and conspiracies, where any day of the week could be their last. Their former captain, whom they trusted with their lives at one point, took away their sense of peace, some of their sanity, and a chance at a normal life. Even now, the painful trauma of their past still haunts them like vengeful ghosts that refuse to move on. But taking down the man who set them on this path would at least give them some form of therapeutic closure, closing this chapter of their lives. And they start the hunt by tracking down Umbrella's founder, Oswald Spencer, to one of his mansions in hopes of finding Wesker. But they're too late as they find the old man dead on the floor. However, Wesker is the one who forced him to retire, so it works out for the two operatives. And so here they are, face to face with their former boss, who no doubt trained them personally at some point, that helped make them into the elite soldiers they are today. And now was the time to put that training to good use. No words, no hesitation. But their years of combat experience is quickly overpowered by Wesker's superhuman strength and speed. And yet, they continue to fight a losing battle because they waited too long for this moment to just let it slip through their fingers. No cost was too high to see it done, and as Wesker is about to kill Chris, Jill reacts without thinking in a desperate attempt to save her friend. In that instance, she throws herself and Wesker through the window and plummets to their death. She accepts her fate as they plunge deeper into the dark abyss. This is the third time Jill has saved her comrade, showing us that she's always prepared to pay the price to protect those precious to her. And thanks to her selfless sacrifice, Wesker was finally taken down, giving the world a chance to thrive, and more importantly, giving Chris a chance to move on and focus on the future. And he could honor her final moments by continuing to live and fight for a better tomorrow, so that others wouldn't have to be burdened with the heavy choice of life and death. Unfortunately, that future is overshadowed by the past, where history is repeating itself when Chris learns that Wesker was still alive. That cold chill up his spine was enough to make Chris go after him once again, knowing full well that he may not make it home this time. And deep down, he accepted that fact. But it gets more personal when it's revealed that Jill survived her deathly dive bomb all those years ago as well. The problem is that she's now working for Wesker, much to Chris's surprise. Forced to fight each other, Chris learns that Jill was being mind controlled the whole time. And eventually he's able to get through to her, and we see just how strong her willpower is. Because for 3 years, Jill was subjected to mind control and experimentation, all for the sake of Wesker's twisted plans for human evolution. And though she had no control of her actions, she was aware of everything happening, while spending every waking moment trying to break out of her perilous prison. Even though Chris helped her regain control, it was Jill that made it possible because she kept herself together during a time where most people would have shattered to pieces with nothing left to save. So here she was, back to her old self. And despite the never-ending torture she had to endure, Jill knew that it was nothing compared to what Wesker was going to do to the rest of the world. so she urges Chris to stop that madman by any means. As if he didn't need any more motivation, he marches forward to finish the mission, and the moment he leaves, Jill's body gives out. Luckily, she's found by Josh, a fellow BSAA operative looking for his friend Sheva. The moment she regains consciousness, she's already planning on how to help Chris in any way she can, once again putting others above her own well-being. And despite her severe injuries, she blocks out the pain as she and Josh fight their way to Chris and Sheva, securing a chopper along the way. And it's a good thing they did, because they found the two fighting Wesker on an active volcano. Both Chris and Sheva ready to die if it leads to Wesker's death. But just when the two operatives had no more bullets to spare and nothing left to lose, Josh and Jill reach out to pull them out of their precarious predicament. And once more, Jill saves Chris from certain death, like a guardian angel who's always on call. But of course, Wesker is willing to die for what he believes in, so long as he can bring others down with him, as he yanks the chopper closer to the lava beneath them. But always a resourceful type, she gives Chris and Sheva the tried and true rocket launcher to put Wesker down for good. And though the world wasn't completely cleansed of bioterrorism and BOWs, at least it was finally free from one of the worst monsters in history. And more importantly, it was a much needed conclusion for the former STARS members. A chapter in their lives that they can finally close with some semblance of closure and contentment. And with that, they're no longer burdened by the pain of their past, giving them the chance to continue living their lives by honoring the fallen and protecting the living. Honestly, it's a shame that we haven't seen Jill chronologically since RE5, given how much of a key character she is within the franchise. I really hope to see her again in future games, because it's through her skills and sacrifices she was able to carve out a path of success for those who wish to fight against bioterrorism, and has saved the world more times than she's given credit for, a far cry from her humble days as a Raccoon City cop. On a side note, I'm thinking of making a few videos on the mainline games and how they hold up today. If that's something you'd like to see, please feel free to let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to like, subscribe, turn on notifications, and join the conversation to support the channel. But as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.